Hi guys, my name is Priyanshu, and in this screencast we are going to learn about the class binding, style binding and input output property. So let's get started. So class binding and style binding. So class binding, when we want to apply some CSS classes on the element on the basis of some condition, for that we are using the class binding. Similarly, like class binding, we have the style binding also. So the style binding are used to apply some CSS styles on the basis of some condition or some on the basis of binding expression. For that we are using the style binding. So let's take a quick example of to implement the class binding and style binding. So open up our a quick start project, which is the basic project we have set up in the first video. So we have for the demonstration of the class binding, we have taken the button. So that button having some bootstrap classes. If you guys don't aware of bootstrap, so don't worry at all, because it just beautify our HTML. Okay, so we having the button class and button underscore default. So let's run our application and see how it's look like. So Control Shift P and new command window, command prompt, and start and run our application by using npm start command. Npm start. So guys, our application is now running. So we having a button which having the default class and the default class and button class, which is a bootstrap class. So now if you want to apply some additional class on the basis of some condition, so for that we have using the class binding. For the class binding, we have syntax square bracket inside class dot and the target class, which will be going to apply on the base of some condition. So we having the active class equals to binding expression. So in that case we having the is active property. So bind over so write over is active property. So if you are seeing that our button is getting some little bit darker, so that active class is apply on that. So so our is active property is true, so the active class is applied. So for look into that, we go to the inspect, right click and inspect. So we are seeing here that active class is applied on our button. So let's see if we change the is active property to false and saved, and it will push to the our browser. So our button will be a get normal button. Okay, let's see if active class is attached or not. So let's inspect it. So our active class has gone. In this way we can implement the class binding. So similarly we having the style binding. For the style binding, we have a syntax square bracket inside style dot the target CSS style property, which are going to apply on the button on the basis of is active property, on the basis of is active property. Okay, so in we having a color property, which will apply equals to binding expression. In that binding expression, is active question mark. If our is active property is true, then the color will be blue colon, otherwise color will be red. Okay, let's so notice that I have written the color in the single quote. Okay, so let's save our file and let's see our is active property is false. So the condition is evaluated, and on the basis of condition the class color property is set as a red, because our is active property is false. So now let's make it as true, save. So guys, our button text color is now blue. So in this way we can apply the we can implement the style binding. Now let's move ahead to the input and output property. To understand the input and output property, we take an example of button. So button having a value property and value property and the event, which is click event. So for the button we pass externally as a value, and it having the click event which will going to emit some kind of data or some kind of function. So that's the public APIs for the button. So it will be a nicer if we can apply the same kind of thing on our custom component. So if I have a like component which is having a property that is like, and having a change event, so that's called the external API or API, public API of the component. So if you want to implement that kind of external API, for that we having the input and output properties. So guys, input and output property. So input property is input to our component, and output as a data, and output property, it emits the kind of event which can provide the external resource as a data. Input and so input property are nothing but providing the input to the component, and output property which takes some kind of output and return back to the parent component, or which output property can emit some kind of event. Okay, so let's go and implement the input and output properties. So guys, for the implementation of the input and output properties, I have created the like component. So in like component we have the glyph icon which is render on the browser. So that is the thumb glyph icon, thumbs up icon. So we having the style property of a component. So in that we have where we can define the CSS classes in that. So I have defined one color class and glyph icon thumbs up, which is overridden class. We having the class binding, that is which is based on the is like property. So is like property is nothing but is our private property. So if you want to make as an input property or make as a public property, we have to decorate it as an input decorator. Okay, for that we have to import it from the core library, and as it is say it's a decorator, so add the rate input and its function. Okay, so now it's a public property. So to access this public property outside to the component, so go to a app.component.ts. inside we have render our like component. So inside we write a property binding here. So property binding syntax, we know that is a square bracket inside our public property, which is like property, and we assign it as a is like property in the app component as a binding expression. So in this way we can implement the input property. So as I change is like property as to false, it will change the color to the blue. Okay, so now let's understand the output property. So output property are used to emit the custom event from the component. Okay, so let's define a property as an output property. Let's make as a change property, that is change equals to new event emitter. Okay, so that event emitter is nothing but the class event emitter. So what is that event emitter? The event emitter just publish the custom event. Okay, so in that case we having the change property as a output property to define. So this is the private property. We can't access this change property outside the component, or so the consumer of this like component can't access that change property as output property or the as an event. Okay, custom event. So for this we have to make as a output property. For making output property, we having the output class, output property, and we decorate that change property, decorate this change property as a output property. So at the rate, it's a decorator, output, so that the change property is now is a public property. So this public property, so we have to emit some kind of data from that. So let's change dot emit, that's the method for change for the event emitter. This dot change dot emit, so it emits the value or the JSON object outside. So new value, new like, I should say new like colon, which is change like, this dot is like property. So now go to our app.component.ts, bind our custom event, that is change equals to expression, and we handle that custom event by using on change method, and it takes as a event object. And now we will implement this on change event in the app component. Let's log our event object on the console.log and event object. Okay, so it will emit the event object which having the new like value, which we set in the like component inside that emit method. In this way we can implement the output property or output or the custom event from the our component. So thanks for watching, guys. If you like this video, so please like it, subscribe it and share. Thank you.